Hi everyone, good morning. Give me a little bit of a thumbs up. Let me know where you're tuning in from for the live Q&A. No, sorry, critique. Gosh, got to get it right. Not enough coffee so far, and it's Friday, that's right. So we've got Garrett sitting on the other side of the camera and he's manning all of this up. And hi everyone, he's made sure that this is going to run absolutely so smoothly.
No pressure.
No pressure, Garrett. And we've got all of the images that were submitted yesterday opened here in Photoshop. Now, I've not done it this way before in the past, but the reason that I'm doing it this way is because I actually wanted to go through each image and be able to show you what I can see in terms of composition or draw on some of the images in terms of the direction of light and things like that. That way you're going to get a bit more of a visual out of this, and instead of me just pointing and talking, it'll be a little more interactive and hands-on, I suppose. But I just want to say thank you to everyone that did submit some images. The goal and the purpose of this is to be able to give people some feedback. Now, I can't be in the group 24/7 when people are posting their images for CC, so this is a great way for me to offer some broad critique and share, I suppose, my knowledge and experience in terms of, the technical side, I suppose, of photography, and just the learning outcomes that I've had over the last 15 years and sharing those with you. So we have 20 images here to get through, and I think I might just kick it off, Garrett, with the first image. Okay. Let's just do it.
Let's just move over here.
All right. Oh, I got small. Hi everyone. Oh, we've got someone from Mississippi, Brazil, New Jersey, Vancouver. Hi everyone. It really does blow me away just how far away you all are, and from how many different countries people are tuning in to learn from. And this community is very multicultural, very multinational.
Upstate New York.
I'll also add before we get started with our first image that these critiques, I used to get a little offended when people critiqued my images and sort of take offense. And even when I submit images now for judging in competitions, when I hear some of the comments from the judges, I often go, they're not seeing what I see. But that's the thing, it's sometimes it can take a little while to process the information, and I want you to take whatever I say away, and whether you agree with me or not, that is entirely up to you. But this is a learning process, and it might take you a couple of days to process things that I say, or sometimes it's just a great way to have another set of eyes go over your photos, because we all see something different, and what's going to stand out to me will be very different to what stands out to somebody else. If you do ever get a chance to go and watch live judging at a print competition, please do that, because I remember doing that many years ago. I think it was 2012 in Las Vegas. I'd already been entering competitions here in Australia, but I was able to go and sit in a judge's room for 2 full days, and I think I learnt more there than I did at any workshop I ever attended, because the wealth of knowledge that all of the judges have and what they see and how they share what it is that they see for you to be able to improve your imagery is absolutely amazing. And I learnt that from watching other people's images, not mine. So I'm just going to fix my mic up here because it's scratching me. Here we go. All right, so we'll get the first image up. How do I get rid of that screen?
That's just a Photoshop screen, so you can just close that one.
Like that? Wow, here we go. All right, so you can see what I can see on the screen here. And that means, just like being in Photoshop, I can change the size of the image and so forth. But I often have like a little bit of a border around it so I can see what's hitting the edge of the frame and what's not. So I'm really enjoying right now the color tones, the color palette in this particular image. It's really soft. They're not distracting in terms of the baby. My face is led straight into that beautiful little baby's face. A few little things that you could potentially kind of tidy up. One of the things that that comes straight to mind is the crop. So it comes straight through a very, very hard surface there, and with very strong lines. So you can see the dark line coming down, hitting the edge of the bowl, and the dark line there. So as I come in and look at the baby's face, my eye is directly led to the outside of that bowl there. So my advice for this would be to leave a little more room around the edge of that prop, because that circular shape is actually framing the baby with inside the frame. And in terms of composition, it's a really great way to really draw the viewer's eye in and bring attention to what it is that you want them to see, which is the baby. So in terms of that, just possibly a little bit more room there at the top. And just over here we've got a dark area. Now it is dark down here in this bottom corner, but you can see that it is the same material, I suppose, that's being used down there, and this is quite different up here in terms of texture and density, and there is a line as well. So be careful with things like that, because they will also draw your eye to the edge of the frame and not keep you engaged with the subject. Another little thing to kind of look out for is that skin tone. So we've got some really sort of strong yellow tones there in the baby's face, and then the hands just seem to be a little pinker. So you can even those two skin tones out so that that's sort of quite consistent throughout the baby. That would be absolutely amazing. But if you have a look over here at the histogram, I'm always talking about exposure, and we've got lots of detail in those highlights, and we've got lots of detail in those shadows. So in terms of a capture, you've done really well, because when you are photographing whites, it's very, they can be very easy to overexpose and lose detail in. So great job, and thank you for submitting. All right, well, I'm smalling this one down again. So this is a great expression that's been captured here on this little baby. A few little things to kind of look out for is that camera angle, possibly coming from a little bit of a higher perspective, sort of, so you're looking down towards that nose just a little bit, and you can get quite creative. With this type of pose, it's very simple. I can see the baby's laying on its back, so possibly just adding a little bit of extra support in behind the back of the shoulders, and that's going to push that baby's chest up a bit and not make that face come down so that you have to come down. So if you push those shoulders up with some support behind the back of the shoulders there, so they come up, the chin will come up, and then you can shoot from a much higher perspective and not have you know, this sort of congestion going on down here underneath the baby's chin. But great capture of that expression. Just be careful of some of the little highlights just over here on the top of the nose and in here towards the eye. Sometimes they can be hard to avoid with babies that have a more oilier consistency on their skin, and that light just hits there. So if you can't avoid it in capture, just use your patch tool, which is this one over here. You can grab that and you can patch that out. Now I'm just going to drag it down here, and then if you go Command Shift F, it's going to bring up a little fade box. So you don't want to remove the highlight completely, but what you do want to do is just draw that down to about 50%. And so now you are a little bit softer in that highlight, and it's not overexposed. The cropping as well is quite tight, and I can see that there's something just up here at the top of the baby's head. So if you are going to crop tight, make sure that you avoid any of those little distracting elements that are right on the edge of the frame that do draw your eye away. And then down here in this bottom corner, we've got a very solid white area. So that's competing for my attention because it is brighter than the baby's face. So just avoid some of those things as well. But great job. All right. This age group is really hard to photograph, so good job getting that little girl to lay down there, because I had one in the studio the other day that would not lie down. And then when he did, it was literally for a split second. So the photos aren't great, but they did get something. Anyway, I'm really enjoying the bright colour combinations you've got going on here, because we've got this sort of tealy aqua blue, and then we've got some pink down here, and that pink's been brought through into that hair. So really good job of coordinating those colours throughout. The one thing that's kind of grabbing my attention here is this camera angle. we are coming sort of from a much lower perspective and we're shooting up towards that baby's face. So what you want to do is position in terms of the pose, the kids side by side, and I know it can be tricky with this age, and then have her, this little one here, on her back looking up towards the camera. That's going to allow you to get over and above with your camera to get that shot of those two little people. And it's going to be able to create more contact. So when I'm posing toddlers, I usually wait until I've got the baby absolutely ready, and then I get a parent to come over and they sit down next to the posing bag, and we explain to the toddler or show them where they have to sit, and I sit their bottom down and then get them to lay back. Now you want to create a surface that's more elevated, not a flat surface, because if it's flat, you've got to get all the way over. If the posing bag is slightly elevated, which means you can push all of the beans to one side, so you don't have a well in the middle, it's more to the side, they can sit down and lean back, and it's more like a normal bean bag. So they're a little bit more elevated, and then you can place the baby in their arm there. You're going to get beautiful connection there, and they're both going to be facing up towards that ceiling so that you can get that great camera angle. Good connection with the eyes there. The exposure is a little overexposed. If you have a look here at my histogram, see where that information is hitting the end of that graph? That means that we've lost some detail there in the highlights. So you want to make sure when you are using white as a background to not overexpose the highlights in that white to bring up the exposure for the skin tones. So the skin tones look good in terms of exposure, but in doing so, the background has actually been overexposed. And because of the contrast with the white and that bluey teal colour, it is quite a sort of distracting background. So what I would recommend is having possibly either a pink or a tealy kind of blue background. But yeah, honestly, the toddler sibling shots are probably one of the hardest things to achieve, and getting those little ones to lay down and cooperate is not always easy, but it does take some practice, and you did great at getting her just to actually lay down, because yeah, after my last shoot. Okay, let's go on to the next image. Oh, and this is what I'm talking about, having the toddler on their back so you can get up and above and to get that connection. I do love his little expression, but I feel like it just would have been perfect if his eyes had been open and he was really engaged with the camera. I mean, he's got the most adorable eyelashes there, but it would have been amazing to get that engagement with the actual camera. So in terms of composition here, skin tones look really beautiful and exposed well in the little boy's face. Sorry, I'll come back to composition. And then just over here, you can see that the baby's face is much darker. So it must be slightly turned away from the light source, because I can see here that let me grab my little brush. I can see here the light coming in onto the little boy's face, and over here, it's a little darker. So you've got to make sure that they're nice and even in terms of that exposure and contrast, and the red tones there in the baby's face. Also, if you just laid that baby down a little lower, so the head was on the shoulder of the little boy, that shoulder then creates some support at the back of the head, which will tilt the head forward. So therefore, because that baby's head's gone back just a little bit further than the little boy, you can see straight up his nostrils. So just bringing the body of the baby down so the head sits a little lower, and that way you can kind of get them to lean their head in towards their baby brother or sister. And going back to composition, here we go, let's go. What have we got here, a 6x4? All right. So if we have a look at our rule of thirds, for example, here, we've got the little boy roughly in the center of the frame, but then the baby right off to the right hand side there. So what I like to do with this particular setup is make sure that both of them are in the center of the frame. So I position my camera angle so that the little boy's head is roughly here, those intersecting lines, and then the baby's head is down here on these intersecting lines. So that means that they're in the center of that frame, they're filling the frame, and you haven't got all of this negative space over here to the left, which is drawing your eye away from the subject. So negative space should always be used in a way that the leading lines flow into that negative space. Right here we've got a very hard dark line, And then again, a nice straight line here, and there's nothing leading you into that negative space. So my advice would be to move your camera angle so that they're centered in the frame. So I'll show you just for example by cropping in so that they're about there with inside that frame. So you've got equal distance on both sides of them. All right. And I'm just going to have a quick look here at the histogram. We have got detail in those blacks and we've got detail in the highlights, which is great, but you do need to be careful with those blacks, because if you're going to print on black, you want to make sure that you haven't lost all that detail and it doesn't just become a black blob on that photograph. But yeah, good job. Okay, all right. The baby's face is just perfect. It is in the center of the frame. The first thing that I see though is this side of the frame, because it's quite busy. So if you have a look at the highlights here and the highlights up here, they're much brighter than the baby's face. So what I'm always looking for is to make sure that the direction of my light is always coming towards that baby first, and if there are any brighter areas, you can always tone those down in Photoshop or direct that light a little more towards the baby's face. So we've also got quite a dark area up here. We've got some strong leading lines leading you up to that edge of the frame, and then we've got a dark area that is competing in terms of that baby's face, because if you have a look at the size of the baby's face and then the size of this space over here, the baby's face is roughly the same size as that, so it's really competing for my attention. Another way to look at this particular type of crop is to remove some of that distraction and bring that baby's face a little off to the side, remove those darker areas there. You can still have some negative space over here, but my advice would be to darken that down just a little bit and crop in a little tighter, and I would do that in camera. So, only because you've already cropped through the base of the baby and the top of that prop. So I would be a bit more consistent, and if you're going to crop through the bottom, I'd also crop just slightly through the top of the head. So that way you've got that nice even balance throughout the image. The pink tones are lovely and soft in terms of the styling, but it is this really solid, hard line around the baby that isn't framing the baby, it's leading my eyes outside of the frame. And I just feel that over here, the texture of the, what do you call that stuff? The burlap is just a little too distracting because of this sweet little face in the center. It's just getting lost with everything that's going on around it. So my advice would be just to keep it simple as you possibly can, because that baby's face is just adorable. Skin tones look great too. All right, we'll get rid of that crop tool. Okay, so another great expression captured here. You can see the interaction with the baby and the photographer. What I always look for in terms of connection is to make sure that you get that baby looking at you, and I can kind of, I'm going to go out on a limb here and maybe kind of anticipate that there was somebody standing behind you getting that baby's attention, and that draws their eye away from the frame. So to get that attention and direct contact with the camera, I always ask the parents to kind of stay over there, unless the baby's obviously crying for their parents, but I try to keep the parents away, and I use just myself to grab their attention, because I really do want that eye contact, because it really is important in terms of drawing your eye in and connecting with the viewer. One other thing here to really consider is your crop. So you can see that we've just cropped out straight through the wrist there and through the feet as well. I really would recommend allowing a nice amount of space around the bottom of the feet and that hand and around the outside of the baby there, because we can see all of this and around the top, but we can't see the rest of the baby. So I would recommend a much wider crop, moving back slightly if you've got a fixed lens, or zooming out a little bit, but you really do want to get that baby completely inside that frame. Another thing to kind of I suppose, improve this particular image is the color tones. It is quite cool. So we've got some magenta tones going on in here, and we've got some bluer tones going on in that background. So just warming that image up just a little bit. But yeah, that's an adorable face. All right. Okay, so we've got a froggy pose, and just looking at this, I'm really loving the styling, the colors, the tones. The wrap in the background is a fair bit darker than everything else in the image, so it does sort of really draw your eye to it, because you come in, you look at the face, and then you're instantly drawn to this darker object at the back of the baby. So you could either lighten that to match the background, or you could darken the background to match the wrap, and then that way it's a much more solid tone around the baby, drawing you in towards the baby. The posing is lovely. So in terms of a composition, you've done really well of capturing that as well. Yeah, great job. If we have a look at the cropping here, baby is in the center of that frame. So yeah, you've done a really good job. Just be careful of that really dark object in the background, because it has got, you know, these leading lines that are drawing you out of the frame. You want to stay fixated on that sweet face and not lose that attention to detail there. Good skin tones as well. Okay. All right. So instantly my face goes directly to Mum's eyes and smile, because I mean, it's just a beautiful smile. You can see exactly how proud and happy she is. So great job at capturing that. The posing is lovely with the hands. The baby looks nice and comfortable, like its face is nice and relaxed. A couple of things to maybe think about next time is the black shirt. If they come dressed in black, I will pose them on a dark background. If you haven't got a wrap, probably use something as, you know, the darkest thing that you've got in terms of that. And because what I'm seeing here is white, black, white, so it's really contrasting, and it's so busy that you, yes, are drawn into this expression, but you get lost after a while because your eyes kind of dancing all the way around there. So if they're wearing black, I put them on a darker background. If they're wearing white, I put them on a lighter background, and then that way the contrast of these tones is not going to draw your eye away from that connection. Another thing to recommend here is you can see how she's kind of bringing her head down. What you want to do is bring her arms up nice and high before you position that baby, and that way you can stand on a stool or a step box or something like that away from them, to come from a higher perspective to shoot down. Getting that mum to lift her chin up is what you want to do. When their hands are down here, and you can see the hand holding the head is just on the shoulder, you've got to bring that chin down. So if she's not a larger lady, but if you did have a larger lady, that's where you can, you know, come into a bit of trouble with creating some double chins and things like that. So you want to bring that hand nice and high so it sits up on that shoulder. And I always say, now I want you to leave your hands exactly where they are while you're positioning the baby, because it's really important to keep them nice and high to get that beautiful contact. Another thing to probably think about next time is the shadow that's in behind her. I can see that she's really quite close to that background. So I get them probably about 1 meter or 2, depending on the size of your studio, the space that you have. I try and get them as far away from that background as possible. That way the light can pass in behind them. You can see where it's coming in there, and eliminate some of those unnecessary shadows in behind there. Because what happens on a white background, when you've got some of those shadows, you can end up with some banding, and that can create problems when you're printing that you don't need. Just be careful with those highlights as well. Right here I can see that some of those whites are really hitting there. We've lost detail, and that'll be down here in the in some of these brighter areas of the wrap, and definitely on that headband. When we place a headband on a baby, we want it to go up into the hair. So you want to see hair below it. A headband should be in the hair, not on the forehead. So bringing that back will also create less distraction, because then when you come in to look at the baby's face, the brightest part is that headband, so it draws your eye away from the baby's face. But yeah, I love the capture of that expression. You can see just how happy she is. It's a beautiful smile. All right, how are we going? We've got a few people on watching.
Got quite a few.
Yay, thank you for joining me. I love doing these critiques and being able to share some of this information. Garrett has also got a TV screen set up here as well, but the writing's a little small. I can't quite read everything from where I'm sitting, but I am.
Check on our broadcast.
Yeah, it's all doing well.
It looks good.
Fantastic. Now I would love to be able to do this for absolutely everyone, and I know that, you know, the time zones make it tricky for submitting a photo and things like that, but we're going to do this every month, so you're not going to miss out. Okay, next image. All right, we've got a beautiful smile going on here. This is absolutely gorgeous, this face. Now, there is a lot going on around the baby, so you want to make sure that when you are styling and using lots of different textures, that they're not going to distract, they're going to add and enhance a photo, not going to draw your eye away from the actual centerpiece, which is that baby's face. So we've got different textures and colors down here and lines, then we've got a different texture and tone going on up here with lines, and then we've got another texture and a tone going on down here and another line going this way, and then we've got another texture here with lines going this way. I'll just bring it back to my arrow. And then we've got another texture and a slightly different tone over here. And then we've got a background with horizontal lines. So there's a lot of different lines in this particular image. Even though overall it is lovely, what you can do next time is just think about, when you're styling, all of the different textures and tones and the lines within the frame that will draw you into the subject, not draw you away from the subject. So whenever I'm placing you know, wraps and different elements within the frame, I want them to either frame the baby and draw your eye in, not draw your eye out of the frame. So something like this, you know, just even a solid background with a little bit of texture. The flowers are lovely. You could soften this down a little bit, and you can also change that tone to match the other tones here in Photoshop. But my advice is less is more, and you want to make it all about that beautiful baby. All right. Okay. So looking at this little one, she looks very comfortable, she looks peaceful. There's a few things to keep an eye on. We're on a very, very white background. There is some shadow there, but it almost does look like that background has no texture or detail. So we've lost all of that, which means it can often feel like it's been sort of cut out and put and placed on there. So to create that connection, you don't want to lose all the texture and detail in that blanket. You want to try and get it as smooth and accurate as possible in camera. Now the wrap that we've got used here is coming straight across the frame and leading you out of the image. If you are going to use wraps and things like that to add, you know, just a little element of styling there, make sure that they're within inside that frame. Also with the placement of the baby, in terms of the capture and the camera angle, you can see that the baby's not in the center of the frame. So you're either going to go all the way over to these intersecting lines in terms of using your rule of thirds, and for me, when the baby is positioned and facing in this direction, I would have them on this side, so it's leading you into that negative space, not have that negative space behind them. Another thing to be careful of is that camera angle. So right here, I can see that this part of the baby's body is actually closer to the frame. So you want to make sure that the way that you pose and elevate that baby with supports, that the baby's head is a little higher, so that way it makes it easier for you to get above, so the baby's head is closest to the frame. And then that way you're going to eliminate a lot of unnecessary shadows and elements down here that are quite distracting. Also be careful of those skin tones. There's some cooler tones down here in the feet and then up in the hands as well. So when you are working on backgrounds and you are sharpening your images, you can see that there's quite a dark line around the edge of the baby, and that almost looks like, you know, like you've gone around with a pen around the outside of the baby. So make sure that when you are sharpening, areas of the image, that you're sharpening the areas that you want your eye to be drawn to, which is usually the eyes, the nose and the mouth. So try to avoid over sharpening the edges to create those heavy darker lines that draw your eye away from the subject. All right, but yeah.
Only a few people with saying that it's coming up frozen.
Oh right.
It is going to keep on recording, so
Yeah.
I think we'll continue. It looks as though it's a bit of internet speed issue.
Okay.
So we're still recording and we're still going. We'll continue on. It has come back up on my phone. So.
Yeah. So I can see a few people that are saying that the broadcast has frozen. If it has unfrozen, please let us know. All right. It is still recording. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I lost a video here.
It's going again online, so we look to be good.
Did it freeze on yours?
It did freeze, yep, and then
Yeah,
it picked
I don't
back
think
up right
FB
from
can
where it
handle the
stopped.
screen share.
Just see.
All right, if you can hear me, please let me know if it's unfrozen.
Tara says, okay, seems to be back.
Okay, great.
Cute baby in purple, that's correct.
Yeah, we've finished that one.
It's, yeah.
We're on to the
So a
next
bit of a
one.
lag. Great.
Okay, seems to be back. Fantastic. Oh, did they not get the cute baby in the purple?
It has come through, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've been watching it on here.
Okay, great. All right, so next image. And again, if it does freeze or anything like that, you can come back and re-watch. This video is going to stay in the group. So you're going to be able to re-watch it over and over again and pick up some great tips from each of the images. All right, so this image has got lots going on around it, and I'm not really sure if there's actually a story or not to this, but I'm loving the composition in terms of the placement of the baby in the frame. That dark background is absolutely beautiful. What is going on around the outside here with the flowers and the leaves is a lot brighter and more contrasty compared to the baby. So the baby seems to be quite dark here, and the wool around it. So you do want to be very, very careful that if you are going to place objects around a baby inside the frame, that the contrast and the depth of field and all of that is really consistent throughout the image, because the background is very, very sharp, but then we've got this very soft kind of wool going around the edge here of the baby. So you do want to make sure that you know, that consistency is throughout the entire image. The little baby's face does get lost. When I come down here, the bowl is much brighter than the baby as well. So the framing is there, but because it's such a heavy object within the frame, it does draw your eye away from the baby. And the placement of these, in terms of that shape and that pattern and the design element, I'm really enjoying it. Just make sure that they are not too bright in terms of, you know, drawing your eye away from the subject. Elements like this should be there to enhance, not distract. But in terms of the color palette, I'm really enjoying the yellows and the greens and the browns. It's got a very earthy feel to it, which I'm really, really enjoying. So yeah, posing of the baby looks lovely. Baby looks nice and comfortable. The background over here, even though the light I can tell is coming in from this side, this is quite heavy. So I would recommend using a reflector just to fill some of those shadows, because as you can see over here on that histogram, a lot of that information is really kind of close to the edge of the edge of the graph, which means this is going to print with very, very little detail and be quite heavy and dark with inside that frame. So you don't want to make that too dark. But yeah, great job. All right. So in terms of what I was talking about earlier with the styling in terms of tone, this is a great job in using a wrap that's very similar in tone to the background. That way the baby really does stand out here. So what I'm going to recommend with this particular image is a slightly different camera angle. So you can see here that the baby's head is, I'm not quite sure if it's actually the same height or slightly lower, but it does look to be slightly lower than the top of the baby's foot, which is pointing directly out towards the edge of that frame. So if you were to perhaps change your camera angle, and I'm just going to create a copy layer here, and so that the baby's head was slightly higher in the frame, that's actually going to sit better in terms of your composition and balance as well within the image. So just bringing that baby's face up a little higher. It's funny how the eye, when it's drawn into the main focal point of the image, which should be the baby's face, how it can be challenged by different areas, but just even changing the height of it brings your eye first now into that baby's face. So just rotating your camera when you're taking the photograph from side to side. If the baby's head is on the left, then you rotate to the left. If the baby's head is on the right, then you rotate to the right, just to bring that baby's head a little higher than the body. I'm also now seeing, you know, this line here is now sort of more parallel to the bottom of the frame, which is exactly what we want. And when you think about your rule of thirds, you've got your baby's head, which is on this intersecting line here at the top of the frame, and then the body leads you into that little bit of negative space off into the background. And now the foot is pointing towards the corner, which is exactly where that negative space is. So you've got a much better composition. Wrapping looks great, and it's nice and tight. The baby looks peaceful. So yeah, good job. Skin tones look really good and even as well. So I'm going to keep going. I've finished talking about this image, and in the previous broadcast, in part 1 of the live critique, so you can watch that. You can go back and watch that later. So the videos are going to stay here in the group. You'll be able to come and watch them again. All right. Oh, actually, just before I do finish on this one, the highlights are hitting the end of the graph there in terms of exposure. Skin tones look great. Just be careful when you are photographing white or cream that you're not overexposing any of those highlights, so you've got detail throughout the image. When you are overexposing, you will lose detail in your print quality. Okay. All right. So in terms of placement here, the baby in the frame, you know, is quite lovely. It's down in those bottom 2/3. If we bring up our rule of thirds, whenever I'm leaving negative space around the baby on the posing bag, I prefer it to be in behind the baby so that the baby's in the foreground. And so you've done a really great job of having that baby placed here. One thing that I would recommend with this particular pose is just adding some support here underneath those feet, so you get a nice curve and those feet tend to come up like that, instead of having that foot coming down and pointing you directly out of the frame there. It just looks like the baby's on a bit of a slope going down if you have a look at that, because as you come down the hair and then to the top of the nose, through the elbow and the leg, it's a very much a straight line that's going to lead you out of that frame. So you want to create some curve and put some supports up underneath those little feet and raise them so it looks like that baby's in a nice curved supportive area. With the skin tones, you know, I can see these beautiful warm tones right here in the baby's face, and then they just sort of start to fade off into the legs and the feet there. So keeping those skin tones, you know, nice and consistent throughout a baby, especially when it's just them, it's all skin, you know, is something that you should keep an eye on. Another thing that I'm looking at here, and we'll just come in, is the direction of that light. So it's really coming down here on the top of the baby's head, right down there, and across the top of that nose. And what it's doing, when it's coming from that sort of high perspective there, is creating shadows here from the brow underneath the eye, and then it's really making that chin area much darker than it needs to be. So bringing that light from more of this position around to here so that it's coming in across the baby's face, in across the baby's face in this direction and going across. So I would have the light coming in this way as opposed to this way, if that makes sense. Yeah, lots of detail and texture here in the blanket around the baby. Just be careful that you don't lose it in terms of depth of field. Your focal plane is obviously, you know, here on the baby's face. And so what you want to make sure is anything else that's on that focal plane in terms of across here, that you've got the same amount of detail along that focal plane from when you're taking that shot. And then as it gradually disappears into the background, you lose that detail because obviously it moves further off that focal plane and into the distance. So that's another thing to kind of consider when you are softening down your backgrounds, that you're not removing too much detail. But yeah, good job. Baby's hand placement and posing is absolutely lovely. Just a little bit of a support there up underneath that baby, and move that light and you'll be seeing amazing results. Okay. All right, so the bum up pose is probably one of the trickier poses to really perfect. You've done a great job there with the chin there on the back of the hand, the connection between the knee and the elbow, and that little foot tucked up underneath there. So good job there. What I am sort of looking at here in terms of distraction is the contrast between those white pants and the blue backdrop. So either having blue pants or a white backdrop, just to kind of even out that contrast or lessen that contrast so that the baby is more the main focus of the image. Because the pants are the brightest part of the image and they're quite large in surface area. That's drawing my eye directly into that particular area of the image. And if we have a look at our rule of thirds here, if you can see the distance from the edge of the foot to the frame here and the edge of the head to the frame there is more space over here. And there is more space down here in front as well, which can be quite distracting because it's just a large surface area of nothing. So my advice with this particular pose is, when you're getting that camera angle right, is that you want to, actually let me do it without the crop tool. So you want to get that baby head and bottom slightly on the same height, but I always have the head slightly bigger, and then I always make sure that I've got enough distance from here to here and here to here. This is reducing the size of this area and it's balancing out that frame as well. So if now we can look at the histogram as well, those whites that are in those pants, because they are so bright, the detail is pushing very close to the edge of the frame there, which means you know, there is detail, but it is very, very bright, and that's why we're sort of not focused on that little face as well. The liquify tool helps really well with this particular pose as well, and I use it just to kind of tuck in any of the little lumps and bumps around the baby's head. And you can see this is quite a hard line here, so I would kind of tuck it in here with the liquify tool and just make sure that this is nice and sort of rounded out as well. And then I would possibly just reduce the size of the baby's bottom, only because it is so large. And if you have a look here, this part, and I'll use this actually, this part of the baby's head is somewhat larger than the baby's face. So in terms of how you fix that in camera and getting that perfect camera angle, but also bringing that chin out just a little bit. So with the bum pose, what I like to do is get the baby nice and comfortable in the top half, having that chin coming up towards the light source, and then I bring the bottom around towards that elbow. So that way the head is exactly where I want it and it's not tucked down too much. The connection is great here, but if you've got that chin down too far, you are going to make the top of the baby's head there look a lot larger than what it actually needs to be. You can liquefy it in and reduce the size, but in camera you can also you know, really change that too. And when I'm coming around with that camera angle, I can see here you've come straight in here. What you kind of want to do is come in from this direction. So that way the top half of the baby's body is closer to the camera, and the bottom half is going to be further away, so appear smaller as well. So a few things to think about there. The skin tones look lovely and even. Like I said, you've got that posing down, but just a couple of other little distracting things to keep an eye on. All right, so another one with the bum up pose. The face is lit beautifully, and it's there. I'm looking straight at it. The yellow is somewhat, I do like the contrast between these two colors, even though when I say, you know, choosing tones that are in a similar color palette work really well. When you've got colors like this that are at the opposite end of the color wheel, they do work quite well with each other. So I do enjoy that contrast, but just make sure that, you know, some of those areas aren't too bright that they're taking your eye away from it. So just up here, that background is really quite bright behind the baby's head, so you want to be careful of that. This is a nice different crop for this particular image, but there is a large surface area right here that that has really nothing in it, so just be careful of that as well. It looks like the baby's head is a little higher than the bottom half, so when I'm doing this particular pose, I'm looking for, you know, that nice even curve around there. So maybe just even lifting up the support there underneath those legs to bring it in line with the baby, the top half of the baby as well. But again, not every baby goes into this particular pose easily, so this might have been where the baby was like, no, I'm comfortable, leave me here. And it is definitely a beautiful photograph, and the parents are going to absolutely love it. So yeah, well done. Okay, oh, look at all that hair. Oh, it's too cute. The color tones through this are just absolutely beautiful. I'm a big sucker for these kind of warm neutral tones. So beautiful job there. Just be careful when you are, you know, really sort of warming up images and things like that, that you're not producing more red tones in some of the areas of the skin. So down here on the baby's feet, there's some red tones. Just up here in the hands and around the cheek and the eyes there. So reducing those red tones and evening out the skin so that, you know, this sort of tone here in the back of the arm is, you know, consistent throughout the entire baby as well. The posing is absolutely lovely. The beautiful straight fingers there. The baby looks nice and comfortable. Camera angle is great. The only thing that other thing that I can suggest here is just to reduce the size of that baby's head. So if we have a little look here and we circle the top half of this baby's head and then the bottom half, you can see that the top half is a lot larger than the bottom half. So therefore, the baby's face gets lost in there, and because there's so much hair, just reducing the top half of that baby's head will really improve that image. And I know that the baby's head is always, you know, quite large when they're born, and it does equate to 25% of their birth weight. So you know, they do have quite big heads, but those camera angles can really help as well. Another thing with this particular pose, even though I said the posing is great, another thing you could consider is bringing that chin up higher towards that light source. You will lose the connection with the elbow and the body, but that's okay, because as you bring that head up towards that light and you shoot from here coming down, the body will disappear into the background, but also the head goes back. So as the chin comes up, you'll photograph more of the face and the top of the head goes back. When the chin comes down, the top of the head comes forward, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
It does. I got it.
Oh, good. Okay. Alrighty, oh, this is a squishy baby. Look at that. All right, I love these little chubby ones. The posing here is lovely. A few things to consider when you are doing the bum up pose, like I said before, is creating that beautiful curve. So here you can see we've got sort of like, I'll just draw like a little bit of a line down, coming down there, then it comes up, then it goes down and up and then down. So it's a bit of a crooked line. What you want to aim for is a really smooth, rounded surface for the baby to go on. So I'm always looking for, you know, that nice curve that way. So a little bit more support here underneath the foot, maybe a little bit more support here at the top of the head. But what I can see here is the support that's hitting in here. If that was hitting in here, if you just push those supports down a little further underneath that baby's head, brought that face up a bit more, and then tuck some supports in here around the top of the head, you get that beautiful curve and bring that face up a little more towards the camera by pushing those supports in underneath that hand. And then down here, I can see that there's some type of support in here, sort of pulling that back to this in this direction. So you're pushing this area up, you're going to get that beautiful curve. In terms of the crop, we'll bring our rule of thirds up. So we are very, very close to the edge of the frame. So just giving a little bit more space around the baby, moving back with your camera, you're going to give the baby a little bit more room to breathe and frame it beautifully with that pink backdrop. So that way it's not so tightly cropped and congested there. And you can also you know, slightly lower the baby's head and bring that bottom up as well to get that gorgeous tushy up sort of pose. Great detail here in the blanket in terms of that depth of field. The other thing to probably consider is the direction of that light. It looks a little flat here. The headband is quite bright, so the light is hitting it, but just make sure that you know, you're pushing that headband up a little higher in the hairline there, so it's nice and straight and it's not a straight line cutting through the top of the baby's head. And then obviously bringing that light around and directing it a little more and feathering it so it's not so flat. What I mean by feathering is having that light just sort of skim across the baby there, so you don't have all these sort of you know, areas that are all evenly lit, and you're losing, what I mean by flat is you're losing the shape of those beautiful little features, because the shadows are what create those, you know, that that depth. All right. So yeah, just be careful with using whites and things in that headband, because it's such a busy headband. It is absolutely beautiful, but it's a straight line that's just cutting through the top of the baby's head because it's so bright. Okay. Oh wow. So I'm just going to zoom in here to have a bit of a look around. And it looks like we've got some fabric going on down the bottom here. And the color tones are quite lovely. The posing is quite lovely as well. It just looks a little stiff. So in terms of maternity, I mean, she's got a beautiful face, and you know, she's really celebrating her body here, and I think this is lovely. There's just a couple of things that you could do to really take this image to the next level. That expression on her face is, you know, she's got a beautiful face, is lovely, but I think what I would have liked is just to kind of see connection with the camera and see those eyes. If you are having them close their eyes, possibly not have their face so dead on to the camera. You know, turn the face away, give it some reason why the eyes should be closed. If the chin's going to be up like that, really bring that chin up if the eyes are going to be closed. But be careful, because when you do that, you're going to see straight up their nostrils. We can see a little bit of nostril here. So yeah, I would have brought that sort of chin down and closed those eyes and had her really kind of holding on there. And then by turning that chin and possibly bringing a shoulder forward, because you've got a little bit of shape coming down here with the legs, and the belly is not square onto the camera, even bringing the chin in this direction, you're going to create a bit more of a curve throughout her body and not have her sort of so front on. I would have also shot this from a slightly higher perspective as well, because you know, her head is actually looking quite small in comparison to the rest of her body. So I would have come up just from a slightly higher perspective, not much, just a little bit higher. And then what I would have done is probably just adjusted the intensity of my light as well. So you can see as it's coming down in this direction here, it's really hitting the belly there, the back of the hand, and they're the brightest parts of the image. We do want to enhance mums' bellies when we're doing maternity shoots, but this is, for me, the pose and the way she's got her eyes closed, you know, you really want the eye to be drawn into that expression. So try to direct that light more to here and soften the light down here. So if you're using artificial light, direct that light, feather it a little more, and possibly also change that pose slightly, because she's not completely square on. Can turn her either more toward the light or turn her body away from the light, and therefore that light's going to come in and hit the other side of that belly and just give it a beautiful shape and really show that. But I love the artistic kind of pieces of fabric that are coming up here with movement. It's almost like she's growing out of a flower. I think that this has got some really, really strong potential to do, you know, to go to an incredible level. With this though, in saying that, have a think next time you attempt this to try and keep more of this within the frame and not crop through it. Whether you use darker fabric at the base to give it that I suppose that grounding, but it just looks like you've cropped straight through it. So kind of think a little bit more about creating something else that can go under there to really kind of ground it and not have those lines leading you directly out of the frame. And then if we have a little look at our rule of thirds here, so she is centered, but just be careful, you know, that you know, they're not slightly off center. So I would have them smack bang in the middle, so just moving that frame over just a little so they are in the middle of that frame, if that's what you anticipate as well. But yeah, you're onto something there. I love the creativity and the difference of that. There's a little square one there. Okay.
Last image.
Is this our last? Oh, it is our last image. Oh, fantastic. Gone through these pretty quick. Okay, this baby is absolutely gorgeous. Look at that face. In terms of pose, you know, you've got that chin up towards the light. So, you know, the baby's face is what you see when you come in here. What I would have loved to have seen is possibly a bit more of a landscape crop instead of a square crop, because it is very, very tight to the top of the head and the bottom here. So if we do actually go back to our sort of full frame crop, so if we were to crop it to the edge of the frame, then you're going to fill the frame with the baby and get rid of some of the space around the baby that's not really necessary. But what I would have loved to have seen is, you know, a bit more of a crop like that, where you can see the distance from here to here, here to here, and here to here is all even, and then you've got that beautiful negative space in the background. And I mentioned earlier, I think in part one, when you're using fabrics like wraps and things like that to sort of style, possibly using it, think about your frame. If you're going to crop like this, in terms of that 2:3 ratio, you've got some negative space over here in the background. I would use that fabric so that it sort of fills this space here, and it comes down away from the back of the baby's head and into that negative space behind the baby. Because the styling, the color tones, they're all really lovely. It's just that what's happening here is the fabric here is quite bright, and it's kind of joining into the back of the baby's head here, and the bottom, it's just looking like it's sitting there, sort of paying a little bit more attention toward that, tucking it in down in here behind the baby. Then it's going to be further away from that light source, and it's not going to be so bright in terms of being distracting behind the baby there. So tuck it in and kind of direct it towards the corner of that frame to really kind of create some more leading lines as well. cropping through a pillow like this that has sort of that hard stitching and a line there, a strong line, is also going to lead you out of the frame. And that area there of the image is really quite bright compared to the baby's face. Now I can tell that the baby's skin is a little darker, which is absolutely fine. So you just want to be careful with those highlights to very close to the face, that they're not going to draw your eye away. Another thing to look out for is just to even out that skin tone. So we've got some sort of pinkier red tones down here in the arm and the foot, and I know that that comes naturally with babies, but just evening out that in Photoshop will create more consistency in those skin tones as well. But I just adore the expression on that baby's face. It's so fresh, and the color tones that you've used here are absolutely lovely. They're very neutral, very natural. So yeah, that's our images. Thank you again for submitting, for those of you that did submit images. I know it's not easy putting your work out there to be critiqued, but I really want to congratulate you for doing that, because by doing that, it means that you want to know where you can improve your work. And for us as artists, for us as photographers, you know, the learning never stops. I'm continually pushing myself in new boundaries and creating new images. Some I've created this week that I can't quite share yet because they're for awards coming up. So by doing that, you're stepping outside your comfort zone, and you're really, you know, you're really trying new things, and you're wanting to improve, you're wanting to grow as a photographer, and unfortunately it never stops. You're always wanting more, you're always trying new things. So thank you again for submitting those photos. I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate you trusting my verbiage, my words when I get them out clearly. And yeah, we're going to do this every month. In the banner of the group, you're going to see some dates, and we've already got some dates there for the next few months. So if you want to pop those in your calendar, you can start thinking about what images you want to get submitted. And I mentioned before, I know it's hard when you're on the other side of the world, and time zones and things like that for when we open it up. So next month what we'll do is we'll open it at a completely different time. We'll give you some warning, and that way, for those of you who aren't sort of on a similar time zone to us, you'll be able to submit as well. But even if you don't get your photo submitted, you know, you're going to learn by listening and seeing other people's photographs as well, and seeing what I see. And you know, I can't pinprick every single detail or, you know, element within every single frame, but what I am doing is going through and looking at some of the bigger things that you could be enhanced and changed, I suppose, and you'll start to see and learn more things every time. So I'm seeing some of the comments up here. It doesn't actually say who's commenting, it says private user, but I can see some thank yous. But yeah, thank you, I really do appreciate it. You've stuck with me, even though we had some little freezing moments there with our connection, but we'll continue to improve this process to be able to do this for you in the group, because I think it's so valuable in terms of education. And I love doing it. I get to judge. I'm off to the UK on Tuesday, and I'm actually judging part of the SWPP 16x20 print comp, which I'm very excited about. And I'm off to WPPI in Las Vegas. That is in February, and I'll be judging for 2 days there as well. The 16x20 print comp, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think it's just a really great way to celebrate photography. And also, if you're considering entering our RISE International Photography Awards, we held those last year and we are holding them again this year. It's going to be around the middle of the year. We'll have exact dates very, very soon. We have a brand new software system that is being built currently specifically for our awards. And it's all about education, it's all about critique, it's all about feedback and seeing where you fit within the industry. And it's a great way to push yourself creatively, artistically, and just to learn and see what you can achieve and do. And what we love about it is that we get to celebrate you and your success, and yeah, our craft, what we do.
Yeah.
I think it's an incredible way. So yeah, we're going to share more details about the RISE Awards probably in the next few weeks, and let you know when those entries open. But these critiques are going to help you know, with you preparing towards that, or just in your everyday client work. So thanks again for joining me and for submitting, and we'll be back again to do this next month, and I will see you all very soon. Bye guys, have a good day.